live, begin the conquest of the universe. Now, this is a bit of a special live. You might notice things are a little bit different. The view of the office is a bit changed. For those of you on audio, you might notice nothing at all is different, and that's fine with me too. I'm okay with all of it. I've shifted to use the camera on this monitor this time. Normally my notes are here. No, my camera's right here and my notes are here. Today the camera's right here and my notes are here. So it's a fun mix up. It's a fun way to mix up the day, create something unusual. I like it. It's nice. It's unusual. It's different. For the Kath and Kim fans in our audience. If you're not a Kath and Kim fan, what the heck are you doing? Kath and Kim is an Aussie show that I think quite highly of. I'm just going to put this video on over here and I'm going to mute it. You've been muted, Adam. What I like about Kath and Kim, well, is everything. It's awesome and it's very heartwarming and it's quite touching. Let's get this camera down a little bit. There we go. We can see a bit more of me, more of the office. I got into Kath and Kim because I saw a preview for the Fox News, or not Fox News, but like the Fox television station Kath and Kim one, which is terrible. It was awful, and I don't recommend you watch it. But I went to download it and ended up downloading the original Aussie show, which is amazing. And Ben and I love that show, so we really got into it. The American one, I think, had John Michael Higgins, who's amazing, and Selma Blair. It didn't go anywhere. But Kim was too attractive as Selma Blair. They needed a less attractive, more repugnant actress to play Kim. Have that. Well, what's up? Welcome to the live show. I'll put this here so I can see comments. I'll put this here so I can see my description. I'll put this here so I can look right at you. So you're seeing a pretty fun, pretty edgy new little view of my office. This is diagonal. So normally I'd be facing this way and you'd see behind me. Now you're seeing this wall. So this is the bookshelf that you're probably familiar with. This is a piece of art from my friend Steph River, some macrame or macrame, as my dad calls it. We've got some cool little maps. They're basically maps here. This is, what is that one? That shows the Earth along the core of it. Up above me right there is the solar system. This you can't see anything about, but that's the human body. And then way down on this side, whoop, is a map showing Gemini and all of our wonderful things. I'm a Gemini. And I'm even better than a Gemini because I'm on the cusp between, I think, Gemini and maybe Aries or possibly Taurus. I don't know. No, I think it's Aries. I think it's Aries. So for me, that's like 4 ways I can orient myself. I'm just pouring a little bit of live tea right over my crotch. I've poured hot tea on my keyboard, but I've never done it on my crotch, so it'll happen at some point. That's the way life goes. And then we've got this beautiful piece of art by Misha Smart. This is where is this? I think that is on an island here called Hornby Island. It's one of the ridges that you can hike. It's a very beautiful spot. I love her art. It looks kind of like stained glass windows, a little bit. Like she does a lot of what I would call cell shading style art, where like there's not a lot of gradient and each sort of segment is colored a particular way, and then that's how the art transpires. That's very cool. And then some of the other treats we've got here, right here is a giant book on history that I like to read through sometimes. Really cool graphical book. I've got a magic wand there. I've got a spyglass, a telescope that my mom bought for me, my mom and dad, when we were in Scotland together. It's cool. Anyhow, this is going to end the tour of the office because it's getting kind of boring for me now. We're on our way to Costa Rica again. We're going to sit one more time in ceremony. When people hear that, they often think, wow, that's fast. You have a problem, Adam. Which is probably true. They're probably accurate that I have a problem, if not many. Historically, that's a fancy way to say in the past, in November, we were actually going to go sit with ayahuasca, but Air Canada messed up our flights. And they said, we hope it's not a problem. You'll be getting in a day and a half later. And we were like, that's actually a massive problem. That's kind of getting in the way of everything we had planned. And so we just postponed our trip, canceled the flights, got a refund, and are going down now. So we'll be heading down. Notwithstanding that, we're working out what makes sense with Rhythmia as far as us teaching and being on staff there. And our plan, like kind of what we're opening space for in our lives, is to be able to go down 1 week every month. So it's been about 3 weeks since we were down there, and this would be like kind of a regular occurrence for us. Up to this point, we've gone down maybe sort of once every 2 months. So just picking it up a little bit, continue to lean into our work there. Um, so that means we have no Grimby. And I'm just trying to check in before I get to our topics to see if there's anything cool or exciting that has happened this week that I want to share. And it turns out the answer to that question is no. There's absolutely nothing for me to distinguish. It's been a very mundane week. So we should get to some of these juicy topics then, right? We should dive into that. Hey, America, nice to see you. How do you like this new view? New and improved view. This thing right there is not an ashtray. It's a dynamic sand sculpture. So you can see there's a little ball that's moving around, and it just traces patterns in this sand. It's quite cool. It's very beautiful. It's kind of like a dynamic, ongoing Zen sculpture system that you don't have to put any of that work into. You know, ugh, that's the worst part about Zen. You got to put in work. Just have the gift of Zen without doing any work. Automate it. That's what that does. What's up, David? Hola. Hola, hermano. Okay, well, let's start. We're going to start with some of Tibby's suggestions. We didn't get too many questions from our audience this week, so we'll go to what you brought first, Tibby. And Tibby, thank you so much. I don't know where I got this shirt. Daniel's asking where I got my shirt. I think this is from a company called Charles Tyrwhitt. If you want to look them up, it's ctshirts.com. Same room, America, just different angle. Normally you see it from this angle. You might recognize this bookshelf right here. This is the angle that normally seen it. And then now I've got my camera's facing me this way. So let's go to Tibby's questions. We'll dive right in. Tibby has a couple of questions. The first one is about therapeutic work and trauma. And then the second one is about religious beliefs, which is where we'll start. So he says, recently I was supporting someone around relationships, and what came up was their religion and how restricted their options were. So, like what kind of person they're allowed to date, what's okay, not okay according to the religion, and I was wondering how to grasp this, especially because these are quote unquote limiting beliefs or limitations that were created by a proxy rather than a person. Do I simply stay with what's okay possible in their religion and explore possibility within that realm? Do I explore their commitment to their religion and what is really acceptable or not? So, pretty common. And some people might begin into this conversation with an argument like, well, they're not limiting beliefs. And what can be helpful to consider is that every belief is limiting. There is no such thing as a belief that is not limiting. Even the belief like every belief is wide open and there is no limiting belief is in its own way limiting. Because what a belief does is it creates an experience, sort of lived experience that there's something true around the abundance of the world, the infinite of the world. And as soon as we put any kind of fence around infinite, we've limited infinite. So every belief is limiting. And the question we want to engage with is not, is this a limiting belief or is this one of the good beliefs? We want to engage with, does this belief empower me to create the life that I currently want? Does this belief enable me to create the leadership or whatever I'm called to create as a leader? Does this belief support that? Does it allow for that? That's the question we want to be engaging with. So any belief that we have is limiting, always, forever. We can't change that. What we want to start to look at with this person is, America, I don't think I understand your question. Due to create, we need a limiting belief. Can you elaborate on what you mean by that? Our beliefs come from all different ways. So some beliefs we just create out of thin air, often especially as you start to work in the transformational realm. Many beliefs we inherit from society, from our parents, from our teachers, from our guardians, from our schools, from our careers, and plenty of them from religions. Religions hand down a whole host of beliefs. And what the question to start to work with is like, do these beliefs, again, right? Do these beliefs empower me to create what I want? So when we're working with someone and they are like, I really want a loving relationship that like fills me up inside and blah, 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 blah. Where we can begin is to look at like, okay, how does that go? What would be required for that? And we'll start to notice the limitation of any particular belief, religious or otherwise, if we're like, okay, what do you want? And they start to describe, and they're like, but here's why I can't have that. So now their beliefs about themselves, the way the world works, the way God works, whatever, start to come into conflict with their desires. And to to um, to have a desire, you're inevitably going to come into conflict with some beliefs. Like that's the nature of it. It's sort of like, well, I want to eat chocolate bars all day long, but I want to stay slim and somewhat healthy. Well, there's some conflict there. And so the aim that we are always trying to create as humans in this kind of work, the work of consciousness, is not how do I make sure that there's zero limitations on my life? That would be absolutely crazy. That would be silly. The game that we're trying to create is like, what will I empower? What set of beliefs, what set of options will I really choose into and empower to lead my life? And so for someone like this, where they're having some religious beliefs show up and get in the way of what they want, the conversation starts to be like, okay, so you're telling me that your beliefs about like your religion and what that tells you to believe says that you simultaneously want something, but you're also telling me you can't have it. Is that accurate? Yes. Okay, great. Are those beliefs empowering you? And often with religion, the beliefs that we inherit from religion are laid down very like they have a lot of gravity. So it's if we inherited a belief just from a friend who's like, yeah, you shouldn't masturbate. I'm just making this up. You shouldn't masturbate because you go blind. That has less weight to it than if a religion week after week after week hammers a belief into our head. So sometimes to get a bit of freedom from a religious belief takes a lot more work. And so what we want to do with these people is just support them to start to engage in that inquiry. Because typically with spiritual beliefs, especially religious ones, not so much spiritual as religious ones, people begin their journey when they're starting to work with a coach or engage with plant medicine or any transformation. They begin their journey with like, that will not be touched. I will never, ever, ever doubt, consider, even look at that particular set of beliefs. That is bedrock. And and all we can really do as coaches, as leaders, is support people to consider whether that's empowering them. And so sometimes the way that looks is we invite people to take a look. Does that belief support you? Absolutely. I don't want to look at that, blah, blah, blah. Okay, great. And then so what we would do perhaps might be like, I just noticed there's a lot of resistance to even looking at that, to even considering that. That's right. I don't want to look there. Okay, cool. No problem. And ultimately, what we're supporting people to do is to come to a place of being at choice. So they can sort of come to this conclusion, they take a look and they're like, they get to a point where they're really clear, if I'm going to empower this set of religious beliefs, then it might mean it's going to take me 6 years to find someone I love, for example. Or it might mean that I'll never find someone I love and I just have to give up on that. Are you empowered in that? Now that you can see the set of choices, are you choosing into this? And what that does is it puts people back at choice in their life. It has them actually clearly choose something rather than just operating that way without any conscious choice in it. And that in itself is growth. So, Tibby, what you're describing here, do I, what did you say here? These are limiting beliefs. Do I simply stay within what's okay, possible in their religion and explore possibility in that realm, or do I explore their commitment to their religion and what is really acceptable? Both. I would start with the second. Like, are you interested in looking at those beliefs? Are you interested in possibly creating some flexibility for yourself around how you engage with your religion and your spirituality? Or do you want that to just be like absolutely the way it is? And if they're like absolutely the way it is, it's bedrock, I don't want to touch that. Great. So given that is now your truth that you're committed to living into, what is available? And people may not like what that leaves them with, but at least they're choosing it. And from that place, it opens up the door for us to let go of some of the victimhood that often comes with us. Because often we're like, if not for these beliefs, I would do this. And it's like, yeah, but you chose those. So you've made that choice. Now you can make a different choice if you want. Those options are both available. So that's how we kind of work with that stuff. And it's important to recognize a religious belief is no different than any other kind of belief, at least in the sense that it's like a belief, it's something created. The difference is that they tend to have a lot of gravitas and a lot of social weight behind them, along with a lot of like religious beliefs tend to have a lot of like guilt and shame attached to them as well, which encourages us to stay in the belief. But at the end of the day, if we want to work through this stuff, the work is the same, which is to recognize it's a belief, to recognize we take particular actions as a result of that belief, to recognize that those actions give us a particular kind of world that we live in, which then reinforces the truth of those beliefs. And if we want something different than that cycle, we actually have to create a new belief and start to live in alignment with that. It's a challenging place for people to be. Let's see, you wrote here, America, in order to create, do we need a limiting belief? I think that's what you wrote. It's necessary by default. So when people, I think I understand your question. When people hear me say all beliefs are limiting, the initial thing they think is, fuck you, limiting beliefs. I'll just not have beliefs. I'll just be open to whatever. But that is a belief. There's no escaping this. And the way Werner Erhard describes this is it's like we're in a prison and the bars of that prison are made up of our attempts to escape it. And so there's no way to get out of having beliefs. That's what humans do. We attach belief. We create meaning around the world based on what shows up. We create distinctions. We hold that light is separate from dark, for example. We have built an entire society based on beliefs. If you read about the Toltec from what's his name, Carlos Castaneda, I think that's how you say his name. He talks a lot about in the Four Agreements. He talks about like the dream of the society. We are constantly dreaming, and what he's describing as dreaming, I would describe as like creating meaning and assembling beliefs. So to try to shut off your brain and just not have a belief won't work, because that would require the capacity for you to just be in complete absence, nothingness. And that's not how our brains are wired. That's not what we do. That's not what a human does. We exist and we believe and we create beliefs. So it's not like it's something you have to do. It's more like just who we are. It's innate. It's the way we're thrown. So we're inevitably going to be creating beliefs, and inevitably those beliefs will limit us in some way. And so the way that we navigate through this in the transformational realm is like one of my coaches, Bay's current coach, used to describe it as like a series of concentric circles. And she was like, wherever you are, that's your current belief about you, the world, the people around you, what's happening around you, et cetera, all your beliefs. And eventually we get to a point where we're like, the life I want to create for myself is this big, and my belief holds me here. And so what we have to do at that point is we create a new belief, a belief that is big enough to allow for the possibility of that new life that we want. And once we do and start to work through it and create the breakdowns and then the breakthroughs, suddenly we are able to have this life, and we have it contained inside this new belief that has room for it. But sure enough, it's just a matter of time before we're like, but now I want this life. And that belief we worked so hard to create is now the one that holds us here. So it's a continual process of like establishing a belief, learning to live into it, letting go of the old belief, becoming like really like, this is amazing, I created a breakthrough. And then eventually realizing, and now it's no longer a breakthrough. Now I'm stuck here, I want to go to the next level. And then we repeat the cycle. So we just continue to do that until eventually we die, pass on to what's next, or decide, I don't want to live a bigger life. I just want to stay right here. And you can let go of that. That's okay. America, you write, so we are creators because we believe. It's baked in us as humans. Yeah, I don't know that I would say like, I wouldn't establish that as a causal relationship. Like I wouldn't say we are creators because we believe. I would say we are creators. That's what humans do. And the first stage in creating anything is belief. That's where we begin creating something. I believe it's possible to ride that horse. I believe it's possible to have that dog as my pet. I believe, and then from I believe, we take action, and that action creates, it manifests the belief in the world physically, from belief to action to physical manifestation. David, you're saying even spiritual beliefs, the ego makes a dogma out of everything. Well said. Yes, absolutely. That's the way it'll work, and that's why there is no belief that is not limiting. And so it can be really helpful, I find, to let go of trying to like grade or judge or assess or like rate my beliefs and be like, that belief bad, this one good. Instead, where I always come back to is, what am I trying to create next? What's the thing I'm trying to establish? And are the beliefs that I have supporting that? And if not, which is the belief that's in the way of that? And then I do the work with my coach to like move beyond that. Daniel, you ask a really great question here. Daniel says, how do you encourage males to open up and discuss their trauma when most are programmed to bottle it up and keep it to themselves? Awesome question, Daniel. Thank you so much for bringing that. So let's dive into that. Let's distinguish trauma first, and then we'll talk about society and how this kind of shows up. So I would assert that trauma is a spectrum. And at the one end of the spectrum, you have what most of us think about when we talk about trauma, which is like capital T trauma. So the far, 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 far end of that spectrum is like PTSD, sexual abuse, like attachment disorder, the sort of like deeply spiritual trauma that comes from like witnessing your friend turn to red mist on the battlefield, or not being able to attach to a human being when you're an infant, and that means that you will not live. You know, deep, deep, deep traumatic stuff. And then the other end of the spectrum, we have what I term lowercase t trauma. And what that is like the trauma that comes when you say to your partner, I love you, and you're waiting for them to say, I love you back, and they don't. They say bye. Or the trauma that comes when you turn to your parents for approval and they just look away because they're busy. Not big life-shaking moments, but traumatic nonetheless. So, and then I would assert, or like the definition I like to work with is that over time we just amass this. So those big, defining, deeply capital T traumatic moments, like one can really blow things apart, but so too can a lifetime of piled up lowercase t traumatic moments. And what's really important here is not that, again, that we get out of like grading it or whatever. I just want to establish that trauma can appear in many, many, many forms. And when we're talking about men opening up and discussing their trauma, that can be men talking about like losing their father at the age of 12, or it can be about men talking about the fact that like they never ever felt loved by their parents, even though they were there every single day, because they never got the feedback that they wanted or whatever it happens to be. So really what we're talking about here, what I think Daniel's speaking to in his question is, how do I work with men to support them to discuss their wounds, their hurt, their pain, their suffering, all of which are the stuff that is caused from trauma. So I'm not going to say anything new here at this point. What I'm going to say is just reiterate, society has trained, at least Western society has trained men not to do this. We kind of have this ideal of stand in front of your feelings, don't have emotion, sadness, anger. Anger is a little more acceptable for men, but like sadness and to some extent anger, even most emotionality is kind of like a weakness. It's ineffective. It's not really what you're here for. That's for the ladies. That sort of nonsense. So we've got a societal belief that we operate with, right? That's sort of like in the zeitgeist. Even if people don't actively say it anymore, what we see modeled around us are people, men, not having their feelings on display, and consequently, that belief is, it travels through us energetically. We pick it up. And that comes from a lot of our parents and even a lot of us. We don't even realize that we hide this stuff and then pass it on to our children innocently. So that's what we're operating against, like, is the fact that there's like this societal and individualistic and parental and blah, blah, blah. set of beliefs kind of guiding us away from that. Here's our truth. Our truth is that every single human being, our birthright is a full expression, a full range of emotion. And as men and women, we experience sadness and anger and happiness and joy and fear and arousal and excitement and all of the range of what it is to be human. So the starting point for men like opening up is meeting them where they're at and recognizing the opening that they're already doing. Because most of the time what happens is like someone is sharing at their level of capacity, which may be very small. And because we have this ideal, like in reaction to the fact that old belief that men shouldn't have emotions, we have a reactive belief that is like men should just knock it off and share all of their emotion. And then what that does is it has us step over the gift, the work that's already happening. So instead of being able to like recognize and meet the person where they were at, we're like, you should be over here. You should be crying right now in public. And then what that does is just like a bridge too far. I can't be seen for the work I'm doing to open, and I collapse. And I fall back into either like forcing something, forcing my tears, which never works and never really feels that genuine. And eventually I get tired of that and I go back to like, fuck it. This doesn't work. It's not who I am. So the first stage is really to acknowledge and recognize in each other the authenticity we're already bringing to the space, and to really like see people in that. Because if you recognize what they're doing, they will do more of it. If we bring acknowledgement and love to someone, if we praise them for what they're taking on, they will do more of that. The irony is that what we tend to do instead is we focus on what they're not doing. And that just diminishes people. It makes them smaller. It shrinks them energetically. So we recognize the work that people are already doing. I often, when I'm training people to become really potent coaches and leaders, one of the things I spend a lot of time on is helping them learn to see the energy underneath what's happening on the surface. And when you do that, you start to recognize things like the intimacy someone just inevitably is for the space, even if what you're watching them do in the moment is be very stoic. And that allows you to recognize who they are underneath what they're doing in any given moment. And then you can start to acknowledge them for who they are, regardless of what they're doing. And that invites more of who they are out. Again, because we're acknowledging it. And what we put attention on is what will grow. So we acknowledge the intimacy someone already is. We acknowledge the tenderness that a man already is. We acknowledge the beautiful connection that we feel in them, regardless of what's happening on the surface. We take away, if you could just do more of that, you'd be better. Don't do that, because that wounds people more. It has them armor up again because they feel hurt. So that's the crucial way that I work with people to start to like open up and share more about themselves. And there's one other part here. Let me just get my hands around it. Oh yeah. The other thing is that I trust that this will come forward anyhow. So maybe not if we're not in a committed, hey Tara, we're all about that new angle. You get art in this new angle. So let me open this window though. It's a little bit toasty in here. There we go. So when people are not in a committed coaching relationship, then there's nothing that continues to like have them come to the edge of what's safe for them. That's part of what the gift of a committed coaching relationship, as opposed to a one-off or like a conversation with your friend now and then, that sometimes can be powerful, but isn't an ongoing commitment to. You'll come up to the edge, but then that'll be it. Whereas in a committed coaching relationship, every week or every couple of weeks or once a month or whatever it is, boom, you're going to be there. You're going to be there. And so the other part I really hold for my clients is giving them permission to be exactly where they are. Like I had a client show up and they told me, I don't want to look at feelings. I don't have them. I don't like them. I said, great. What I know is that that's going to show up at some point, because if someone's really committed to being a transformational leader, the only way we can do that is by being fully expressed. It's an inevitable part of the process. And so as we walk down this path together, she's just going to start to come into conflict with those emotions. They're going to naturally come forward. They're naturally going to start to show up. And so by trusting people and letting them be where they're at, giving them permission to be where they're at, and acknowledging them for what's underneath where they're at, it kind of creates the fertile soil in which that stuff can start to come forward. That's in radical contrast to the should that exists and that a lot of people feel pushed at them, a lot of men in particular. You should be more emotive. You should be more emotional. When we hear that, we think, fuck you. Why should I? Why? Why do I have to do that? So we dig our heels in, we justify why we're at, and further, that you should does nothing to acknowledge the fact that most of us learn to keep our emotions in check because there was a safety in that. So it's sort of like going up to someone that learned to put on, I don't know, bulletproof vest because it keeps them safe and saying, you should stop wearing that. And they're like, no, I shouldn't. And until you start to recognize like the need for safety and work with people there, trying to insist that they take off their armor, it's actually more damaging. It actually causes trauma rather than helps people move through it. Awesome question, Daniel. Thank you. Okay. Well, Tippy's got another question, but I'm going to come back to that in a little bit. Let's see what I'll talk about. So one thing I'll speak to here is at the end of every coaching conversation with my clients, one of the things I do, well, I do this a lot everywhere in life, but one of the things every week at the end of every conversation with a client is I acknowledge them. I ask them what they would like to be acknowledged for being, and then they tell me, and then I acknowledge them for that. And I do this because it's an opportunity for me to love them, to love people at the end of a hard, usually a challenging conversation for an hour. Sometimes it's a nice conversation, not always challenging, but often like you're doing some pretty heavy lifting in a coaching conversation. You're up against some of your own resistance. And so being acknowledged, being loved at the end of that can be really nice. What happens is that a lot of people struggle with that. My people, maybe not your people, my people struggle with that. And so what often happens in the world is that we're like, okay, I just won't give them that, or we'll just step over that, or the client should be like, oh, it's just, that's something he does. I just like shut off, or I start to multitask when he's doing that, whatever. The gift in being acknowledged is that it is simply an opportunity to be in the experience of being loved, free of any strings. Just an opportunity to be loved. And so what's beautiful about that is whatever shows up for the client as that's happening is a reflection of their relationship to love. And our relationship to love in the modern times is fucked. We got all kinds of stories about love. Love comes with strings. Love incurs a karmic debt. Love is not to be trusted. Love means that you're going to be manipulated. You get, oh, you're so cool, and then they're going to pull something out from you. It's going to cost you. Love will cost you. Love means that in just a couple of moments, you're going to be given the other part of this shit sandwich, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so what happens is we become very armored and guarded against love. We create all of these incredible approaches to not let it in because we can't trust it. And so that's what happens at the end of each of these conversations. People receive love and they deflect it, they armor up, they white knuckle through it. Oh, just get past it. I hate this part. Don't let it in. And so there's something really beautiful there because it provides an opportunity for us to recognize the relationship this person, hey Mia, the relationship this person has to love, and then to support them to create a new relationship if that's what they'd like. So I see this all the time in high level leadership, corporate executive leadership at higher levels. You tend to have a lot of people that typically would be not so much diagnosed, but people would just be like, they're quite sociopathic. They're quite cold. They can be quite ruthless. They're hyper logical. And what these people have learned to do is shut out any need for love because love's kind of inefficient, right? It doesn't like move the bottom line forward. If the bottom line is making more money, having your heart open is not really amenable to that. We could get like fancy and find a way to say it is, but like at a simple surface level, having your heart open's more of a liability than anything. So these people have learned to shut their heart off. And what that does is it means that they're immune from feeling love. They're also immune from being hurt. Their hearts can't be punctured by the world around them. It's pretty safe. And so what's happening at the end of each of these conversations is it's like that armor is being challenged. And when that armor gets challenged, it feels uncomfortable and it doesn't feel very nice. And so what happens when someone has learned to shut their heart off and to not be hurt by the world around them is that they can no longer really be present to their impact. They can be present to it in the sense like, did it make me money or not? But because their heart's shut off, they can't really feel, did that leave someone feeling hurt? Did I hurt someone? Did I upset someone there? That's kind of, they've got a wall up so that they can't feel that anymore. And as a leader committed to transformation, if what you are is a leader committed to like increasing your bottom line and that's the end of the story, this isn't a conversation for you. You don't have to worry about this. But if you're a leader committed to transformation, so much of our work is in learning to see our impact more and more and more, and to be responsible for that impact more and more and more, so that we can align it with our intention. Is the impact I'm having in alignment with my intentions as a leader? And if not, oh, cool, that's some information. I got to possibly do some work to bring it into alignment. So that's hard work. And that's really scary work. And that ties back into what you had said, Daniel, about like, how do we get males to open up and discuss their trauma? We're really having people that have made a life out of keeping their heart protected for really good reasons and have created thriving careers out of doing so. We're slowly welcoming them back to their heart. We're slowly helping them let go of some of the armor so that their heart can open back up. And when you do that, it puts you at a tremendous risk. Puts you at a risk that people will start to be able to hurt you again, whereas before you were immune. You will be open to the world in a way that you previously weren't. And that means that the world can now impact you. But it also means you can now impact the world in a much fuller way beyond just moving money from bank account to bank account. So that's why I like to acknowledge my clients, is because it brings this into the surface. And frankly, because it's fucking nice to be loved. Whether or not someone has yet developed the capacity to receive that, at the end of the day, what we as humans crave is to be loved, to be seen exactly as we are and accepted exactly as that. And it feels really good to love someone, to see someone exactly as they are, and to love them exactly as they are. And so it's an act that like opens my heart back up. It sources me at the end of a tough conversation where I'm standing for someone and they're in resistance and doing their very human thing. And it allows me, it provides them the opportunity to start to deepen their own relationship to love and to start to question the relationship they've built around it. Does the story that love is fake or phony or incurs costs or is going to establish some debt, is that serving me for what I really want? Wow, way better angle of you in your office. High review from Michelle. Thank you, Michelle. That's good to know. I just have two computer screens. This is just the other camera. So, but I'll take that to heart. It's more interesting. You can see the corner behind me. That's the corner of my office there. There's more of the curios are in the shot. The highest of reviews. Okay, so let's transition from being acknowledged and receiving love to being okay with not getting. So being okay with not getting here's how it sounds. I'm okay if people don't like me. I'm okay with people thinking I suck. I'm okay with people being disappointed by the feedback I give them. I'm okay being by myself. So I'm okay being with blah. So we become okay. We word it in a couple of ways, but really what's happening is we reach this point where we're okay not getting something that is ultimately part of our birthright. Your birthright as a human is the abundance of the full experience of being a human. So that includes like sadness, love, joy, the whole thing. You just keep going as long as you like, Michelle. And what happens is we learn like, I'm okay with not getting X. Whatever part of life seems to be elusive, I'm okay with that. So What's happening here is sneaky. The sound, like I'm okay with not getting, I'm okay with not having a job I really love, for example. That sounds kind of like stoicism. The Stoics were, I think they were Marcus Aurelius, so he would have been, I think he was Roman. That sounds Roman. I'm pretty sure Roman. Anyhow, as philosophers who really looked at like in life, we fear things like, oh my God, what if I lose my son? And so the Stoics, their practice was to feel what we were afraid to feel. Like, okay, well, then I'm going to sit in contemplation. I'm going to be with the thought of losing my son. And I'm going to be with all of what that incurs in me. And by doing so, the Stoics found that they were freed from trying to make sure that didn't happen because now they could be with that feeling. That's some deeply transformational work. And so there's a lot of wisdom in Stoic practice, and it's quite popular amongst a lot of like Silicon Valley leaders and startups and stuff like that. And so this kind of conversation, this statement, I'm okay with having a job I don't love, on the surface sounds a little bit like a Stoic practice. Like I've learned to be accepting I can be with this part of life. I can be with the idea, the fact that I'm just not going to have a job that's that great. I'm just not going to have that house on the hill that I kind of want. But it's actually the reverse. It's actually the opposite of that practice of Stoicism. Because when we're saying I'm okay with being by myself, what we're kind of trying to do is like, I'm fine with the feeling of loneliness that I have. But rather than sit in the feeling of loneliness, we're trying to escape it by being okay. So rather than sit in like I'm by myself and I'm feeling lonely and sitting in that experience and being with that, instead we flee. We escape up to I'm okay with. And so we end up with a life that we're okay with. We end up with an okay life. What really would set us free would be I'm willing to be by myself and I'm willing to feel the full range of feelings that show up for me when I do that. And when we're willing to practice this way, the beautiful thing is that life moves us back towards our birthright. Because if I feel like I should provide some personal context here, so let me do that. Um, who I am in part is connection. A man that loves connecting with people, loves meeting, understanding people, learning more about them. When I get introduced to someone, I've got questions for them. I want to know about their life. That's just innately part of who I am. And when I come into a room, I bring the room together naturally. I'm kind of like social lubricant a little bit. When I get afraid, some of my fears are like I'm too much, I'm too intense, I'm too focused on people, that's off-putting, or I'm not enough, I'm robotic, I'm awkward, people find me hard to be with, blah 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 blah. And ultimately from those fears, what's really hard for me to sit in is like awkwardness. You know that feeling when you meet someone new and you're like, "Hey, do you like things? Me too." And it's all awkward. That's tough for me to sit in because I feel to some extent a lack of the connection's a bit janky at that point, and then that plays into my fears. Fuck, I'm awkward and uncomfortable. That's not true. It's just a part of being a human. When you meet another human, it's a little bit awkward. But for me, that awkwardness is significant. And so one of the strategies I learned was to hang out by myself, connect inwards, be connected with myself, explore my passions, my hobbies, paint miniatures. These are all miniatures I've painted, build Magic the Gathering decks, do stuff like that by myself. And if I do that, then I don't have to go and be with that fear. I don't have to confront that awkwardness that feels so crappy. Now, as I do that, there's a degree of loneliness that shows up, but I can ignore that. I can ignore that and retreat up into I'm okay being by myself. I'm okay being by myself. I'm okay being by myself. I don't have to feel stuff around this. If I'm willing to sit at home and let go of that mantra, the safety of like, I'm okay, and instead just sit in, how do I feel right now? And not try to put my finger, on the scale. Oh, I feel okay. But instead, like, how really do I feel? What will start to show up, especially for people like me who are connection, is some loneliness. And feeling that loneliness is scary because it kind of guides me back towards my fear. It guides me back towards confronting my fear. I'm lonely. What is there to do? Go be with people. But if I go be with people, what if I'm awkward and But that's what life is doing. Life, if I'm willing to engage with it, is letting it's bringing me the feeling that brings me back towards my heart, back towards the full expression of who I am. Because when I stay at home, there's an aspect of my expression that is going unexpressed, unmet in the world. And I can be okay with that feeling, but it's not what I really want. And it's not really engaging with my birthright. So as a practice not being okay with stuff. Practice feeling what you actually feel instead of insisting to yourself that you feel okay. Okay is, I'm coming to the conclusion that okay is quite a toxic state to be in. Toxic probably makes it sound a little worse than it actually, like than I intend it, but being okay is typically something we use to not engage fully with what we actually feel. And so okay is a bit the product of boredom, where it produces boredom. Like when we're okay with stuff, we tend to be kind of bored because we're actually not fully engaged with the fullness of our experience of the moment. This is a cool practice that I'm taking on is anytime I feel bored, when I feel bored, what I do is I run off to get stimulation. I stimulate myself and then I'm like, now I don't feel bored. But typically what's happening when I feel bored is that there is some felt experience. There's something I'm feeling that I don't want to feel. There's some experience I'm in that I don't want to be with. It's scary, that historically I was not able to be with. And so my system, somewhere along the way, I created this strategy to like, instead of feeling that, just disconnect from it, dissociate from what I'm feeling. And when we dissociate, we go up into our head. And it's boring up there because it's lacking the experience of our life, whatever that experience is in the moment. So we're not feeling something. So of course I'm bored. So I disconnect. I'm safe, but I'm bored. And then from my boredom, now I'm not feeling whatever there is to feel. I'm feeling boredom or the lack of feeling. And from that place, what do? I go stimulate. Go play video games, go have a drink, go eat food, go do any number of things, all of which are stimulative because they will medicate my boredom. So the fascinating thing about this to me is the three layers of it is that like there's what's there to be felt. There's the boredom that got created as a strategy to not feel that. And then there's the strategy on top of the strategy to manage the strategy. So it's like, oh, I'm going to do all these things so I don't have to feel bored. And what happens, I think this is kind of neat, is as humans, we get really fixated on like the strategy on top of the strategy. Ah, I'm drinking too much. I need to stop doing that. Sure, we can stop doing that, but the problem isn't really the drinking, it's the boredom on top of what we're not willing to feel. And so you can stop any of these strategies designed to stimulate yourself, you're still going to feel bored. And the discomfort of your boredom, you're still going to seek stimulation. So the practice I'm engaged in with these days is one, see if I can notice when I'm like stimulant seeking. That's the first step. Can I notice that part of me that's kind of compulsive in his behavior, that's like reaching for stuff? Second, can I check in and feel the boredom as a starting place? And then third, can I slow down but a moment, because I have little patience and practice with this, and ask myself, what do I actually feel right now? What physically do I feel in my body? What emotionally do I feel in my body or my spirit or my whatever? What else can I identify I'm feeling? That's crazy hard work for me. So much, it's very surprising. I can do a lot of stuff. I can move mountains. I'm really reliable to create results. But to stop for like 2 minutes and just sit here and be like, what do I actually feel right now? I have a lot of resistance to it. And what shows up instead is like, fuck it, whatever, who cares? Let's just go do the thing. Come on. Impatience, a need to get going. Because on some level, if I don't engage with that and I go do the thing, I won't have to feel whatever I'm feeling that I don't want to feel. That on some level, I don't yet have the capacity for. And so I'm learning to build the capacity to feel these things that otherwise have for most of my life stayed below the level of my consciousness. It's crazy. Crazy and also like makes complete sense. Okay, let's talk about the cruelty of our obliviousness, and then we'll come to Tibby's last question. So, the cruelty of our obliviousness, the thing about humans that's so infuriating, it's that infuriating, you have to say it that way, is that we have cognitive blind spots. I know I've said this before, but I'm going to say it again. What makes a blind spot challenging is not that it's a place we cannot see. What makes a blind spot challenging is it's a place we cannot see that we cannot see. So the best metaphor for this is the visual blind spot that we have. Our visual blind spot is a place where the optic nerve connects to our eye, where there's a part in your field of view that is blank. Your eye's not able to send information. It goes missing in the information sent back to your brain. But what your brain does is it accommodates for that. It fills in your field of view. And it does what are called chicanes. It moves your eyes rapidly back and forth so you don't desensitize to what you're seeing. The stimulus stays fresh, and we move our eyes around, so that allows the whole picture to kind of be filled in. But if I just told you you have a visual blind spot, there's an area in your field of vision that you can't see, you'd look around, you'd be like, moron. Not true at all. I'm looking, everything's filled in. It's all a complete, consistent, coherent picture. So we have to trust that that's a thing, that there's this visual blind spot thing, even though our senses tell us otherwise. Our felt experience suggests otherwise. Our cognitive blind spot is the same way. Our cognitive blind spot is like, we literally cannot see the thing that people are pointing to. And so the way this works is like you'll go to your friend and your friend's complaining about the same thing they always complain. And you're like, I think you really need to blah, 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 blah. And your friend's like, yeah, that's not a bad idea, but, and then they go back to complaining about the same thing they just complained. You're just like, I just gave you the fucking solution. The fuck? They can't see it. They can't see that they're batting it away. They can't see that no matter what, it's like a magnet. You just sort of move around it. They can't get there. You've had this experience with your partners, with your romantic partners, business partners, friends. It's inevitable. And we all have it. We're all doing it constantly, time in, time out. So that's just a part of being a human. And for the most part, the nice thing is we get into relationship with people that have kind of like similar blind spots to us. And so we kind of move around them elegantly together, unwittingly, or we bash into them with each other and then stop the relationship, whatever. All of that's preface to what I want to say, which is that when you make the stand for yourself in your life to step into being a transformational leader, part of the work you're going to be doing is to open your heart up to people, to let people impact you out of a recognition that that's the way we are able to impact people. The only way for us to impact other people is to let them impact us. If we are impervious, they're not going to be able to feel our heart. And if they're not going to be able to feel our heart, they're not going to let us in. Our imperviousness begets theirs. Our vulnerability begets theirs. So we go first. So we open our hearts up. We let them impact us. And then what people will do is they will be incredibly cruel. And they will be totally oblivious to it. They will do stuff that comes off really nasty or really mean or really cruel or really careless or whatever. And they will do it completely oblivious. They will have no awareness of it because it'll be in their blind spot. And this is the madness of transformational leadership. This is the craziness of it, is that you are basically doing something that is superhuman, that is divine, which is being willing to let people hurt you, to wound you, and to do your work to heal that, to not take it personally. And of course, you're going to take it personally, or at least I am. And we got to work that through. We got to get supported by our teachers and our coaches so that we can get that handled and then come back and remind ourselves they don't even know. They're not even aware that this is how they're coming across. And what we typically want to do when we've been wounded is we're like, I want to give this fuckface is getting some feedback so they know the impact they're having. But that feedback is like a hammer thrown at their forehead. The more that, and that feels good in the moment. And like I've seen coaches label this all kinds of things, like I was powerful with them. Nope, you just did the same thing to them that they did to you. You were exactly the same way they were. The but it's satisfying. The harder work is to like take that hammer to our own forehead and be like, ah, man, I didn't even see that coming and I'm wounded. And then to work ourselves out and to come back to a place of really being able to see like, oh, they're doing their best. This is the best that they can do right now. They're they're not doing this out of malice or nastiness or anything. They might be coming off that way, but they're oblivious to it. And we have to start to see the innocence in that. And if we can hold them in that way, like to really hold their innocence and to not make them wrong for it, whilst putting it in front of them. That's the art, is to put stuff in front of people, but not make them wrong for it. To just instead love them and like, hey, this is what's happening, and I don't think you're aware of it. Is that what you want to be doing? And if we can bring that with love, then they can choose one way or the other. If we bring it as a fuck you, idiot, you should be doing something different, they don't have a choice. What's going to happen is they're going to dig their heels in and be fuck you. And so part of the bonkers work of stepping into transformational leadership is kind of an awareness and a choosing into being with the innocence and the obliviousness of people's cruelty. Or maybe a better way to put that would be like the cruelty of their obliviousness. That's crazy. So thank you, all of you who practice that. And for anyone that's sort of like, I'm on the fence, maybe that'll help you decide out of it. Now, I will say that the rewards for that kind of work are immeasurable. The opportunity in engaging with the world that way is that you get to experience all of what life has to offer. You could think of it like it's interesting. The metaphor coming forward is like an orgasm. It's sort of like the difference between sex, where two partners are like have stories about like what's acceptable and what can I ask for and how should I show up and which emotions are acceptable during sex. That's not going to be particularly good fuck. It's going to be like tepid, right? Because it's dictated by all these rules about what's acceptable and what's not. Contrasted with a couple that are really free with one another and have developed art and are like, it's okay to bring anything forward to this practice together. That's going to be really good fuck. And so that's what's available when we step into that kind of arena in our own leadership, is that we get to engage with life at that level of fullness. And what that does is it provides us an opportunity to experience all of our birthright instead of to experience what it is to be human through this tiny little pinprick, this little hole, little aperture. Plug at this point for my teachers, our teachers, Bay and I's teachers, Justin and London just put out their book. Their book, Playing with Fire, just came out. I highly recommend it. It's a fantastic book. It reads super easily. It's very exciting to read their work. They're both great writers. They're very deep teachers, and we owe a great deal of our relational art, I guess I would call it, to our work with them. So check their book out on Amazon if you're not familiar with their work. Playing with Fire, Justin and London. They're awesome. Justin Patrick Pierce and London Angel Winters. Let me see if I can find it right quick here on Amazon, then I can share it with you guys in the Amazon.com. Playing with Fire. Oh, I've done it wrong. Playing with Fire, Amazon.com. Now let's see what it's going to bring a bunch of nonsense up. There's all the nonsense, so I've got to add in a search term. Justin Patrick Pierce. Here we go. Okay, there we are. Copy that link. Put it over here like a good person doing your internet work for you. I should put that in a let me Google that for you link. Cool. There's their book. Okay, let's finish up with Tibby's second question. Tibby, thank you again. Tibby says, I'm curious, how do you support clients when you uncover some deep traumatic experiences that are blocking them in their work towards the vision for their life? Do you refer them to a therapist in parallel, or what is your approach? What's the line? What is the line where? And then it tailors off. I don't know. That's where the question ends. So that's a really good question. What a lot of coaches do is have zero awareness of therapeutic matters, trauma, anything like that, and just barrel into it. And then what ends up happening is because coaching is the active engagement with our fear, transformational coaching, breakthrough work. The work of transformational coaching is the work of supporting someone to walk up to the edge of their fear and step over it, and then to have whatever shows up show up, and then to continue doing that. And if someone has, remember, we've got a spectrum of trauma, so we can kind of work along it. But if someone is dealing with like PTSD or stuff from sexual abuse or whatever, pushing them or even standing for them to climb over their fear when that's what's in the way can actually serve to rewound them. So for me, I often like one, I'm always kind of listening for like capital T trauma, suicidal ideation, sexual abuse, alcoholism, like, these sort of dysfunctional patterns of behavior in their family and in their own lives. And when I hear about those, I ask, have you gotten supported around that? Have you done work around that? Have you talked to therapists around that? I'm not asking because I'm stigmatizing that stuff. I'm asking because it's really important that I know what is the context in which my client is working with this stuff. So that's the first thing that we should do. Not skirt around that issue, but go into that issue as soon as it shows up, ask the question that needs to be asked so that we understand what's going on, what we're working with. Second, for anything that's like really deep traumatic stuff, like those things I mentioned, generally speaking, I would suggest to someone like, it seems like this is fairly therapeutic in this area at least, and I'm going to suggest you connect with someone, and I can refer you to someone if you'd like. Is that something you're interested in? Sometimes that means we end the coaching, but not usually. And the reason is that one, there's many areas that we can work with in someone's life in coaching, and inevitably that's going to be what happens. So their trauma may be related around like their dating, but we can still look into like the trauma may be related around their relationship to different sex individuals and their dating life. It's going to be more pronounced there. Of course, it's going to show up in all areas of their life, but just to a much lesser extent. So we can work in tandem with a therapist, and often that can really be a really beautiful partnership. So there's nothing wrong with that. And if I notice sometimes, like often the hallmark for someone where there's something that feels quite therapeutic is where it feels really embedded. Like if 6 months in a row, someone keeps showing up and they're just like, I'm terrified and I can't make myself do anything. And we've like looked at it from 58 different angles, and we've like created structures to support them, and we've looked at their fear and they keep bringing forward their fear. That's usually when it's sort of like a bit of an indicator. Oh, this occurs like something that needs to be worked with therapeutically rather than coaching. Because the baseline of coaching in a lot of ways is like, yeah, your fear's scary, but it's just fear. And all there really is to do is to step into it, to not let it stop you. And so if that fear that someone is feeling is there because they would have died if they had disowned and dishonored their fear, then just stepping in, like then relating to their fear through that lens is kind of, it's damaging. First, we need to like heal up that fear so they can get back to the point where they're like, oh, in this life that I now live, I'm safe. In this life that I now live, my friend's not going to just die beside me. In this life that I now live, I don't have to be hypervigilant. So there is a bit of an art here, and you can do things like take trauma-informed coaching classes. One thing that I find really helpful is to work with your own therapist. Not enough people do this, in my opinion, and our government doesn't, we don't really hold this kind of stuff with the kind of value we ought to. Personally, I think we should charge more taxes and then and then encourage people to work, like subsidize people working with therapists and coaches. But I'm a bit of a socialist, and some people would say that's kind of paternalistic. I just think our society would be better if everyone had the gift of these kind of relationships. But that's fine. Not everyone agrees with me. The point being, I think one of the best ways to start to identify trauma and that sort of stuff is to like take on your own trauma, work with your own therapists, work with coaches that can help you identify this, take classes in this stuff. And one of the best ways for me in my life has been like my partner, who I love tremendously, has had a very traumatic upbringing, like really, really rough upbringing. And so what often happens in relationships like that is that people leave. They're like, I don't want to have to like stay by my partner and deal with this trauma and blah 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 blah. But like I have learned so much, one about myself, two about trauma in general, from um from being in those conversations with her and being in work with our therapist together, because then I can see how I relate to it and how I show up in the face of that stuff, which is as much the impact of the trauma as it is how it shows up for her. And we don't really want to look through that lens. We're like, no, it's their trauma. It's not. It's not. The way we respond to that stuff is as much ours as anything. And yeah, it's easy to push it off onto them and be like, it's theirs. I don't have to deal with it. But then you're going to end up in a coaching relationship with someone and be like, I don't know how do I deal with this? Well, go back and deal with it. And what that work has done is it's allowed me to get better and better at seeing that sort of stuff and to start to identify it. And I think it's worth saying here, um, there's no there's no answer book for this. Like you can kind of like list some of the things, like when someone is frozen and unable to make any decision, that's probably a traumatic response. And you can start to like, okay, fear, flight, fawn, freeze, the four classic sort of afraid, fear-based kind of responses. All of that stuff we can identify, and that's really, really important. It's important to get at your hands around that stuff. And because this operates in a spectrum, there's sort of like there's always going to be a point where you won't have just the right answer. And you kind of got to do your best to navigate those moments and clean up the messes that you make. So that's my response to that question, Tibby. Great question. Thank you for bringing it. Hey, Andrew, nice to see you, bro. Andrew says, hey, Adam and all. Cool to see you record from a different angle. I love the portrait in the background. You mean this painting, right? As opposed to a portrait? Me too. I'm a big, at least I think of portrait as like a face as opposed to like a landscape. But me too. This is an artist named Amy Smart. She's amazing. She paints all over British Columbia, which is the province I live in, which is just a province of infinite beauty. There's just so much beauty. And this is a ridge that I've hiked. I go there sometimes with my friends. It's an island halfway. It's about a 4-hour drive up our island. And then to get here, Hornby Island, for those of us that are in the area, to get to this place, you have to take one little ferry to an island called Denman, and you have to drive across Denman, which is about 30 minutes or so, and then take a second ferry onto Hornby. So you can just imagine there's the mainland, British Columbia, that's the westernmost province in Canada. To get to this place, you have to get onto my island, and then drive for 4 hours, get onto another island, and then get onto another island. So it's like 3 islands removed from the mainland. So very like cool kind of energy, cool kind of vibes. That's good. It's good to live on islands. I have a growing belief that like there's a gift in things being less convenient, and that convenience is not really a good thing for humans. I think for stuff like healthcare, that's really good, but like having an answer to a question, I don't think that's so helpful that that's really convenient for us. I think we're better served when things are a little less convenient. Because if we can't just look on the internet for the answer, we have to sit in the inquiry. And sitting in the inquiry is really healthy. That's like a tremendous part of what it is to grow, is to sit in questions rather than to jump straight to answers. So I often tell people one of the things I love about where we live is that it's quite inconvenient. It's a pain in the ass to fly anywhere, to go anywhere else, all of that sort of stuff. Let's see what you wrote here, Andrew. Andrew says, I've been putting more attention on the trauma aspects that show up in coaching. I found that clients who are more trauma-based have been the hardest and most heartbreaking to support in their journey. Excuse me, I'm going to burp right into the mic. So I see the next part of my journey to be able to be with more of the trauma that people are facing and be able to support them in it. Yes. I find trauma is very heartbreaking to work with. And I also find people that have, we could call it like the death by 1,000 cuts. So that'd be more my upbringing, like very small little bits of trauma nothing reprehensible, nothing that we would flag, just moments of like feeling from my parents, whether or not it was accurate, like learning the lesson. It's okay to have feelings and to cry. Just, this work's not going to go away. So just know that you have to come back to this. Well, what I learned, what I created from that was like, well, then there's no fucking point to crying. So I'm not going to waste any time there. Let's just do the thing. And then I became very good, better and better and better and better as life went on, to stepping over that thing, that emotion, and just do the thing. And whenever, back to what I was sharing earlier, whenever I feel that emotion, what do? I go looking for the thing instead of trying to feel the emotion. And so there's a different kind of heartbreak for me in that one, because with trauma, it's like it's almost so big it's hard to look past. Whereas that death by a thousand cuts, I can often find myself with people who are like working really hard and doing a great job making a really good argument for why they don't care what people think. And then simultaneous to that, I'm like, but I can see that you do. And I can see you've learned to disconnect from that, but I can feel how much, like, I can feel your upset, your anger. And underneath that, I can feel your heartbreak that these people are showing up this way. You do care. You just can't see it. And that is its own different kind of heartbreak. I'll tell you guys, to like love people is devastating. I was talking to my friend Michelle Aiken, who's a phenomenal coach and leads coach training and does work for Discovery Card and all kinds of cool stuff. And we were just letting ourselves be humans and being hurt by like all the knuckleheads that we support. And we're knuckleheads too. This isn't anything specific to anyone, but just we were reflecting on how devastating this kind of work is and how much easier it is to show up armored and unconscious in our life. It's easier. It's not simpler. It's easier though, and it's not more fulfilling. Like, to be with all of the devastation is a much more fulfilling way to live your life, but it's not easy. It's really you really get scratched in this game of life. You get wounded. Okay. Thanks everyone for hanging out. I hope you guys have an amazing coming week. I don't know what the hell I'll be doing. I'll be doing something. I'll be meeting with ayahuasca and convening with her, furthering my work that way. I'll probably do a live. We'll see how I'm feeling, but I'm feeling kind of called to like share some of the work from down there while I'm in it. What's up, Leaf? Good to see you, bro. So keep an eye out for that. Might be doing something like that. And I think Bay and I, for anyone that's interested in the Forge, I think Bay and I will do a live video together this coming week about just some of the gifts and possibilities that allows for. So if that's something you're curious about, keep an eye out for us to do that video. Have an awesome weekend, guys. Peace.